Now, if I were to ask you to come up with the names of directors with a distinct style in their filmmaking that emerged in the past 2 decades or so, may be a bit of a difficult task. Well, at least compared to coming up with directors with a distinct style that came up in the late 1900s, your Hitchcocks and your Kubricks, etc., etc. Now, in more recent times, this perception of the film director as the author of the film, or auteur, is not nearly as prevalent today as it was in the 20th century, after film's initial conception. The concept itself was called auteur theory, but we'll come back to this one later. Now, in terms of audiovisual media in the modern day, there is one more factor that plays into what some people like to refer to as the death of the film author, where the input of the person that originally conceived the story becomes less and less meaningful. And this additional factor is, as you probably guessed, interactive media. See, it's one thing for people to say that the director's importance should not overshadow the importance of everybody else who works on the film. It's another thing to have the director's importance overshadowed by the audience members themselves, who, through their choices, can control the pace and outcome of the story. But of course, that is examining interactive media broadly. There are many examples of interactive film, for instance, that provide viewers with this illusion of control, only to tug away the rug under their feet towards the end. If you want a bit of a distant example, Kino Automat was a Czech film about an ordinary man's terrible, horrible, no good, bad day, and the choices that he has to make throughout that day to minimize the damage of various awkward situations. Turns out, no matter what you choose to do on his behalf throughout the entire film, he will be the reason why his apartment building burns down that day. And there's nothing you could have done to work around that. Not only that, the film will eventually taunt you and beat you over the head about the fact that there was absolutely nothing you could have done. Your presence in this story was about as meaningful as a can of dehydrated water, and the film wants to make sure that you know that. But that was many, many years ago. Today, I'd like to direct your attention to a relatively recent piece of interactive work that astonished critics and average consumers alike. Heist with Markiplier.
Alright, we're in.
But you already knew I wasn't going to say Bandersnatch. Now, this isn't the first interactive YouTube original that Mr. Mark Fishbach has put out in the past few years. But going over the narrative, the details of the script, and how the individual endings are laid out in this one in particular, I figured it is very poised to helping us explore the concept of viewer control in interactive media. So I think what I'll do is I'll give you a quick crash course in the theoretical groundwork in the realm of film studies about auteur theory, how this idea of a film author was born in the 1900s, how this idea of a film author slowly became diminished in more recent times, and then we can get into the fun stuff about Heist with Markiplier and where it fits in the grand scheme of things in relation to auteur theory. In regards to auteur theory. And the question I like to focus on is whether or not the viewer, i.e. you, are the author in this heist, so to speak. So, I hope you got your napkins handy because I figured I'd feed you your veggies before I get into the meat of things. Trust me, you want this rather than the other way around. So, auteur theory was originally conceived by a group of film critics in the 1940s writing for a French film magazine. It originated because these critics wanted to further appreciation for American cinema in Europe. Now, the original intention was to provide more recognition to lesser-known directors in the US at the time, whose work was often overshadowed by what was widely considered the upper echelon of filmmakers. The theory emphasized personal styles that come out of a director's body of work, so any aesthetic or thematic similarities across their lineup of films would be considered part of their style. There's a film scholar by the name of Peter Warren that summed it up very nicely in an article he wrote about auteur theory. Basically, if the director is author to a text, then it is the spectator that has to work at reading the text. Now, fast forward to the modern day, where the popularization of interactive forms of media like video games and participatory films, so on and so forth, it helped form this idea that many film scholars like to call new narrative, where it's the viewer who arranges the cinematic elements to control how the story plays out. And this harkens to a concept widely referred to as death of the author, because, spectator no longer has to read the text, they are the ones arranging the text. And that is about as reductive of a version I can give you about auteur theory. Now, let's dive into the main event. As the name suggests, Heist with Markiplier is an interactive experience on YouTube where you get to conduct a heist for an ancient artifact in a museum alongside a famous YouTube personality, Markiplier. Although it is worth mentioning that the heist only takes place in the initial 6-minute introductory video, the bulk of the experience is actually about how you deal with the aftermath of the heist now that you two knuckleheads triggered the alarm. But of course, after a heist with Markiplier doesn't roll off the tongue nearly as well. Either way, you trigger the alarm, and then you are led into this classic choose-your-own-adventure scenario where you start off with a choice of sneaking away from the guards that are approaching you, or, I need to take a deep breath for this, blasting them in the face with a hand cannon you got from a pirate exhibit. Now the choices will eventually lead into branching paths that culminate to a whopping 31 ending layout. And once you reach each ending, you will see that each of them has a unique name accompanied by the question, try again? Of course, if you have not tried out the experience for yourself, I highly recommend doing so, but regardless if you plowed through the narrative or are just starting out, you're welcome to participate in this, whatever we decide to call it eventually. Now, I'd like you to make a choice. Based on the info I provided you so far, plus anything else you may know about Heist with Markiplier, would you say that within this heist, that your input matters? Do you believe that you, viewer, are the author of the story? Yes or no? Just push the button. Oh, so now you decide to go and make yourself a cup of chamomile tea while I sit here waiting for you. You know what, I get it. It's difficult to put your hand on the mouse and then slowly work your way to the yes or no button, but you can do it. I believe in you.